She was on the Muppets. She had to do it.
She did do it on the Muppets, didn't she?
Yep, sure did.
Uh,
Because
we're just gonna start this right away.
they had a Muppet character that was supposedly a security guard from like the bank or Fort Knox or something like that.
Oh, nice.
Going crazy. It's just telling me that we're doing a podcast and I should watch.
And then like Bunsen does an experiment and was turning gold into cottage cheese. And
oh, nice.
So there's like this gold covered cottage cheese and this is cottage cheese. And he goes, yeah. Because it's Bunsen, so he doesn't really care that he took something incredibly valuable and turned it into like a health food. It's the fact that he did it that makes him happy. The value changing means nothing to him.
So here we are live in the spoiler room. Thank you for joining us this evening. It is third time's a charm. It's the third week of the month, and we are continuing our special series. And tonight, it is the third James Bond film, Goldfinger. Yes, from 1964. And tonight, to talk about this third James Bond film, I have a great crew with me. First off, we have the BFD, Mr. Glenn Bittner. Hello, Glenn.
Hi.
You going to sing a few bars of Goldfinger for us?
No, I don't think I will.
Are they gold bars to sing?
Yeah. And that voice you also heard here is Doctavius himself. Stevens with us tonight. Hello, Doc.
Hello.
And yes, we are talking 1964, the third James Bond film that also starred Mr. Sean Connery in the title of James Bond and Goldfinger. Now, Goldfinger, we've kind of been hitting a little bit of a hit or miss with some of these third in the series episodes so far as who liked them and who didn't. So, Doc, we're going to start with you. Goldfinger. How do you feel about Goldfinger?
In general, it's I would say it's a good film. Connery's still he has it, I think, locked in at this point. So, and to some degree, I think they've got the formula established. Mm-hmm. But at the same, so they've hit that weird balance of we think we know how to make these now, but it's before they get to the point where they become a little too maybe like self-indulgent or they try to start branching out in different directions or anything like that, where it gets kind of weird. Maybe, yeah. No, I think this is. I think by a lot of people, this is like when you say name a Bond film, I think Goldfinger is one of the ones that pops up in part because of the song. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, no, there's a lot going on in this. It's interesting, certainly.
Yep. And Glenn, how about you? How do you feel about Goldfinger? Your initial thoughts before we dig into it.
This is one of my favorite Bond films.
Nice. And why is it one of your favorite Bond films?
Odd Job.
Oh, yeah.
Good reason.
Yeah, that's a really good reason, and we'll get into Odd.
And it's also the first Aston Martin.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, we'll actually get into a lot of that with Goldfinger here. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story of Goldfinger, it's James Bond who's investigating a gold, I guess you could call him just this really rich guy who really loves gold. Huh?
He's a collector.
He's a collector. Yes, he collects a lot of gold. And James Bond uncovers a plot by this individual, Mr. Goldfinger, to contaminate the gold at Fort Knox. You know, one thing I love about especially these early Bond films are these storylines that they come up with, and you know, Goldfinger's motivation of why he wanted to do this. I thought it was just real interesting. Glenn, how'd you feel, or what'd you think about Goldfinger's motivation of his what he actually wanted to do to Fort Knox?
Yeah, that's crazy billing for you.
But I mean, it just out of the blue. I mean, and here we're also on American soil. Were the other two? I don't remember. I don't think the other two went to the U.S. at all, did they? No. So this is the first Bond film we get where it takes place mostly in the U.S. which I found
though no one ever set foot there.
Yes, all filmed on sets at Pinewood Studios, if I read that correctly. Good old Pinewood. But they did replicate Fort Knox apparently very accurately.
And a KFC.
And
from the outside.
It
was good to see the Colonel.
Good to see the Colonel in Her Majesty's land there. So here we have Sean Connery as James Bond, and Doc, you already touched on it, but we'll go a little bit further. Sean Connery hitting his stride and thinking I think he's got the handle of how he wants to play his James Bond character. Glenn, would you agree with that? That Connery really kind of found his Bond now and has really embraced it by this time?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Mm-hmm. Is this too where we see a lot more of the, I guess, characteristics of Bond that carry out through even today's Bond? Would you, some of those characteristics, do you think he kind of established that and they've ran with that ever since?
I think so. I think Connery was the first one to really kind of make the role his own.
Mm-hmm.
And just so much that kind of stuck. It's just kind of like, this is what James Bond is. This is who he is, in a way. Although I do like that they actually toned down some of the original language. I think one of my favorites was when he first meets Pussy Galore. He ends up saying, I forget what he actually replies. Oh, I must be dreaming.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the original line was, he said, I know you are, but what's your name?
Yeah.
That was barely too suggestive for 1964.
Just a little bit, yeah. Well, I mean, when you have a character named Pussy Galore, and of course he doesn't call her Miss Galore throughout the entire picture. Bond calls her Pussy.
Yes, Pushy.
Pushy, yes. Doc, how about you with Connor? You said he's hitting his stride. Would you say he pretty much established the blueprint by now with Gold, especially his portrayal of Bond and Goldfinger that we still see even today in the new Bond films?
I would say so. There were a few moments where I was watching it and I had kind of a Daniel Craig kind of, okay, that's kind of where that came from thing.
Mm-hmm.
And admittedly, while we all know Connery wasn't the first performer to be Bond on screen, the first one on the movie screen, certainly. Barry Nelson was the first Bond on. He appeared on TV playing Bond as the American he's supposed to be. But beyond that, you got the Aston Martin in here. You got the shaken not stirred moment happens. Just being one step ahead most of the time, but not always all the time. And some of the action, most of the fights, they're not cinematic fights. They're a little more brutal, a little more realistic. Obviously, we take them to a different degree now than we would have in 1964. But they're mostly one punch and down fights, and they can look kind of they look sincere, if not necessarily brutal, like they would, Daniel Craig punching a guy down a flight of steps now. But
yeah,
everything, things change and they stay the same, and they stay the same as they change. So
they really just seem to get the feel of who Bond was. Not only Sean Connery, but the director and writers of the film seem to really have gotten what works, and everything kind of clicks in this film. And so you get Bond, and of course he goes through a rather large number of female cast in this movie. Like 4, I think, in this one that we actually have, where they have like spoken lines, because you've got the classic Bond opening where you get a little scene that sometimes is related, sometimes isn't, before the credits, and you've got the dancer there who he almost gets offed on.
Yes.
And then you have the famous Goldfinger girl, the girl covered in gold. That one is Shirley Eaton. That she didn't get a lot of screen time, but she's on the famous poster. And then Tanya Mallet playing Tilly Masterson, her sister. She doesn't last too long till we get to Pussy Galore. I mean,
and her flying circus.
And her flying circus of bomb blonde bombshells, if you will.
I had a Sousa, as soon as I saw the sign, a Sousa merch was going through my head. I couldn't help it.
But yeah, this film really did establish a lot of your common Bond tropes that carried on years, decades after this, even down to your female character with the rather suggestive name, played by Honor Blackman. Glenn, what are your thoughts on Pussy Galore?
I was a fan of the old Avengers series, and I know she quit that to do this.
Yep.
And it's something I had never known until a friend of mine told me was they actually had a nod to it in an episode of the Avengers, where
that's right.
Her character was God, what was it?
Kathy Gale.
Kathy Gates, right? Gale. Kathy Gale. They John Steed received a Christmas card from her, sent from Fort Knox.
Yes.
Yes.
During the Emma Peel series, yes.
Yeah, and the suggestive names of the characters, and I just Honor Blackman I love. I mean, the fact that she was one of my favorite characters in Cockneys versus Zombies.
Oh yes.
Wasn't expecting us to go there. Cool.
Yeah, that's it's and the thing is there's so many people that she's been in so many things that people don't even realize.
Mm-hmm.
She's been active for over 60 years, I believe.
Oh yeah, because we're talking 64, and then she was in the Avengers the year or two before this.
She started in 1947.
Wow.
Wow.
So
very established by this time.
True.
Yeah, and the last thing she did was in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So.
Okay.
Oh yeah, she was on Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Tons of British series.
Oh, that's right. She was in. Oh, that's
Professor
right.
Lansky, Trial of a Time Lord.
She was in the Colin Baker series. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
and she tries to use kung fu on him too, and it didn't work.
Yeah,
not on the Doctor, on the Vervoids.
Yes,
the Vervoids. Got it.
And I liked her character. What'd you think of her as a Bond girl, though, Glenn? I mean, she's the first one I think that doesn't exactly swoon immediately for Bond.
Yeah, she's definitely more of a independent woman, I guess, or more a stronger woman, despite her obviously ridiculous name.
Which may be what made her even a stronger woman. I mean, and she stays pretty strong throughout, staying resistant to Mr. Bond's charms for the most part, which, I think is good for you. Actually need that for a female Bond girl. And I think some films have had that kind of lacking with actually having a strong female character. What about you, Doc? Would you say Pussy Galore kind of set also the standard for your Bond girl?
Yeah, I would say so in a lot of ways, because she, as you know, to some degree we are speaking relatively, certainly.
Sure.
What's a strong female character for 1964? In a lot of ways, to some people would look as it's still incredibly regressive in a lot of ways, but for the time period, I would say definitely she comes across as independent. She comes across as very strong-willed, as you noted. She's not immediately, just looking at Bond and getting googly-eyed. The way she seems to get kind of turned to the side of good, shall we say, is definitely awkward based on our eyes. For the eyes of someone in 1964, a little less so, perhaps, because, we are looking at, about 20 years after World War II, about not quite 20 years after Korea. So a lot of these activities are looked upon in a different manner than we would look upon them now. But for the time period, definitely, I would say so. She's a very strong character for that time period.
Well,
goes toe to toe with them.
She does go toe to toe with him, but also, I mean, she stands out, I think, too, because this film, it is the 60s yet, and times are still trying to just start to change, but this is a rather misogynistic film if you look at it. In some ways, the way Bond is, I'm not saying like viciously, it's just that Bond, like all the girls except Pussy Galore, just like, oh, James, her and Moneypenny, Moneypenny as well, but just the overall how he handled like that opening scene where he's kissing the dancer and he sees the guy in the reflection of her eyes, which I thought was a great shot.
It is.
So, but Glenn, what does he do to avoid getting punched by the guy in the opening?
I forget.
He spins her around so she takes the blunt of the weapon. But because there's the part of me that goes, ooh, yeah, that's awkward. At the same time, there's a part of me that reads that as, okay, this is Bond, who that it's not so much that he's like, well, I'm gonna beat up on some women now. It's more of a, I don't care. Guy. It could have been a guy. That could have been a gal at that point. It's just, nope, this is how I'm gonna protect myself. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, he kind of plays a character to be that suave, sophisticated international playboy guy, and at the same time, he's got that steel underneath him that just goes, he has to do what he has to do. It's for the mission. He doesn't care. And again, there are guys from, who are watching this in '64 going, okay, I remember when I was in the war and we had to do some things, and you didn't know if you were coming back, and if you had a chance to snuggle up on some attractive woman, you were going to take a chance to snuggle up on some attractive woman because you don't know if you're going to get back to your lady at home if you had one. So to some degree, he's their wish fulfillment that would have continued in a suave, sophisticated manner, as opposed to being in some, most likely most of those guys were in some dirty, foxhole somewhere, just wishing that there would be ladies for them to snuggle up against, whereas Bond had that. And some of it is, it's just, that's that, even to what you were talking about before about, things that don't change. Daniel Craig has that level of don't care.
Yeah.
If I gotta kill, if you're in the way of the mission, you gotta go.
Well, I got the impression too, though, that there's very little. What I loved about that opening sequence too, there's very little dialogue in it. Which I really dug. How it pretty much was the music carrying it and the action going on. But you get her, and you almost get the impression she set him up. So at first you're like, oh man, he just put her in the line of the punch. But then you go, she did set him up.
Yeah.
to get killed.
She very much did. She was very much the bait, shall we say.
So I think that also justified that action. But throughout this film, he is like alpha male, and it's not till you get to Pussy Galore that he suddenly kind of has met his match, so to speak. And not only is she his match, but she's in a position of power with her her pilots, which I could actually forgot that part of the film. Glenn, how about you? What'd you think of the Pussy Galore and her flying blonde? Her flying
circus.
Flying circus. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you maybe a little bit for the time that this was made, that she is in charge of basically an all-female flight crew for the circus, where in that time you might still expect that to be a group of guys?
Well, if we weren't making a James Bond movie, yeah, but I mean, of course you're gonna have a flight crew of all women
because it's Bond, right?
It's Bond. You're here for Bond, women, and a villain. That's what you're here for.
And a villain, yes. The villain Goldfinger, played by Gert Froib. Is that how you pronounce it, or Frob?
Frob or Frobe.
It's German, but
yes, because they thought Orson Welles would be too expensive.
Yeah, only to find out that Gert was gonna
cost them more.
Yeah, by getting 10% of the box office.
Yeah, and for box office, this was huge.
Third grossing James Bond film of all time.
Second, when you adjust for inflation.
Well,
Nice.
it's second. Yeah, it just beats Thunderball. Thunderball and it are kind of neck and neck as far as how much.
Well, Thunderball's comfortably ahead.
Oh, is it? Okay.
They were close in number of ticket sales. But
okay.
Thunderball had. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Goldfinger sold 130 million tickets in the U.S. That's insane.
Especially for 1964.
Yeah, but which I love. They sold 130, and to give you an idea of prices, they sold 130 million paid admissions.
Mhm.
It made $51 million.
I was gonna say, it's like a 50-cent ticket or something.
Yeah,
probably.
it's 50 cents. Actually, it averages less than that. It averages like 40 some cents a ticket.
So this was a huge deal, and now you see with that box office from the U.S., you now know why they set the James Bond film in the U.S. for the most part, because we get Felix as well, who shows up, who was in Dr. No, but I don't believe we had a Felix in From Russia with Love. So this was a returning character. I believe he was missing from the second film. But you get a lot of returning characters in here. But going back to Goldfinger, as Bond villains go, Glenn, what is your impression with Goldfinger as a villain?
He's so-so. I mean, figure two. This is the first time for like Connery that we don't have Blofeld,
right?
And the whole Spectre and Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
Although they retconned that and said, oh no, yeah, Goldfinger was a member of Spectre because he's apparently wearing a ring at some point, but they never mentioned anything. I think he's an okay villain. He's not great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fact that I think he's overshadowed by Oddjob, who really doesn't do a whole lot other than throw his hat like 3 times.
And a little wrestling.
What's that? Well, that propelled him out of wrestling into acting and gave him a whole new career. Well, the fact that he even went by a lot of things he's credited as Harold Oddjob. What's his last name?
Cicada.
Yeah, Harold Oddjob Cicada.
I like the fact that his credit in the movie, though, has his real name and then his wrestling name after that. It's
Tosh Togo?
Yeah, Tosh Togo. Like, in the event you thought he looked familiar, this is why.
Yeah. I remember the local, one of the PBS stations here in Milwaukee used to, on like Sunday nights, would run old wrestling matches.
Really?
Yeah. And I saw a wrestling match with him.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, he's a multi-time tag champ, so in the NWA.
And he made one of the most memorable Bond villains, and he doesn't actually do much. You're right, but he's really a character.
He throws Connery around pretty good in that last fight. Though.
Yeah, he does.
Oh,
He's winning. He is winning that fight until the end. And then, just like that, he loses the fight.
He forgets about conductivity.
Yes.
Well, he was beating him hand to hand. He didn't really need his hat.
No,
but
but he sells the hat so well because it's like all of a sudden Connery comes with the hat and he's like, "Uh-oh, you have my hat. I'm in trouble now." Because that hat is awesome. You can see in his face. You look at his face and he's like, "Oh crap, this could actually be a problem."
He does. You actually get a little bit of emotion out of him. Up until then, he's kind of the cold, hitman, whatever, odd job guy for Goldfinger. But in that moment,
Korean.
Yeah,
I say it, the air quotes you can't see, but Korean.
Yes.
Man's from Hawaii of Japanese descent, but he's playing a Korean. It's okay.
Yeah. He's from Korea.
At least he's not from Nebraska.
It's 1964. We should be thankful they have someone who has some Asian blood in them playing someone who's supposed to be Asian.
This is exactly my point. I'm agree. That's exactly what I'm trying to get.
It could have been Mickey Rooney.
You beat me to the joke. Son of a gun.
Our job is, and this is again is that point where it established so much of that those Bond tropes, because Odd Job really is that villain that henchman guy that you see later on, only exaggerated in a lot of other Bond films after this, especially when you get into the Roger Moore era, where the henchmen are just way over the top. Here, there's subtlety to them because it made sense, I think, with the Goldfinger character to have a guy like Odd Job,
Yes.
you know, who was quiet, you know, basically followed orders and was actually pretty scary.
Yeah.
He's a rather intimidating gentleman, you know. So whereas Goldfinger, yeah, you're right. As far as Bond villains go, I would have to say that he is kind of, though he does get the moment with the laser on the table, you know,
Which is iconic.
You know, what do you expect me to do? You know, no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. You know, it's like he gets this one line that's just iconic that you see that scene over and over again.
Yeah.
Doc, how about you with Goldfinger? How'd you feel about him as a villain versus, say, Odd Job?
I Goldfinger manages to be crazy in a normal enough way, and that's, I think, his advantage is that if you were just mingling at a party and met this guy with this weird name, you go, okay, that guy's kind of unusual, but he's not. He doesn't walk into a room and immediately just go, that there's something wrong with that guy.
Unlike Odd Job.
Not even with Odd Job. No, because there are, like you've said, there are other, you know, villains where they'd walk in and you'd go, okay, that's clearly the bad guy in this film. Our Goldfinger can at least blend.
Mm-hmm.
He can be mellow. He apparently owns a golf club, and Odd Job gets more points because he knows how to cheat at golf.
Yes. There's a scene, folks, where Bond, rather than doing the poker scene like you would get between Bond and said supervillain, he plays golf against Mr. Goldfinger. And of course, Goldfinger, being the bad guy, cheats, and with the help of Odd Job, who Goldfinger loses a ball in the rough, and while they're walking around looking for it, Odd Job drops one down his leg. It's like, oh, here it is.
Hey, look, here's your ball.
Well,
that's not his ball. I'm standing on his ball. Which sounds painful when you say it like that.
It does sound painful. Bond is stepping on Goldfinger's ball.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
I'm not that sorry.
No, you're not. You're not that sorry.
Anyway.
But yeah, I love that whole scene. But you're right. You're right. Here we still have Bond villains that feel normal enough that they don't feel like they're ripped out of a comic book yet.
He's a gentleman.
Yes.
To a degree.
But,
he's got quarters for Bond. It just turns out that it's a cell underneath a stable. You know, things like that.
Which, I love that scene, folks. Bond gets captured by Goldfinger, and he takes him to his ranch because Bond manages to talk his way out of death. The one of many, many times he's able to do this with the villain. And, you know, why are you monologuing? Let's just get a gun and shoot him. Sorry, Austin Powers flashback. But I loved how they put Bond in this dungeon. And Glenn, you remember the reaction that Bond has by being put in this actual dungeon cell? The look on his face, did you notice it at all? He almost looks insulted, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit.
It's something that I noticed when they were putting him down there. It was like, wait, Bond looks like he's insulted that they're putting him in an actual stone dungeon room. Of course, Goldfinger doesn't invest in the best other henchmen because, you know, Bond does what he does best and escapes. And that's when we get this grandmaster plan from Goldfinger. And I still think, on the whole, even though he's not a great villain, he feels like a realistic villain up until the nuclear gold part. Would you say, at least, Glenn, that he's a realistic villain more so than, say, later Bond villains?
Then some of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he doesn't have his, you know, gigantic volcano lair with 16,000 jumpsuited minions and Um, but yeah, no, I think he's a little more believable.
Mm-hmm. At least the way they set up his character,
Yeah.
you know, and the way he's played as well. In general, I think this is before Bond really it takes off and gets zany, and he's got this grand plan to irradiate the gold, so his gold gets higher in value, and they throw the U.S. into economic turmoil, which he gets his funding by an interesting method. Doc, what'd you think about the group where Goldfinger got his money from? The organized crime families of the U.S. Did they seem like cliched gangsters?
He wasn't getting the money from them. He had used them to get materials for
That's right. Yes.
for the attack on Fort Knox.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they come straight out of a Jimmy Cagney film, by and large, and don't last long. But it seems like it's the Chinese primarily that are putting or at least helping fund this. They're the ones that have come up with the dirty bomb, I think, or the device, as he puts it. And I felt bad because I didn't notice it during the film, but then as the credits went by, was the scientist that developed that, was that Burt Kwok?
I think so.
I'm like, oh, I saw his name fly by, and I'm like, oh, I feel bad. I missed Burt. I love that guy. He's so awesome. Even with he was Kato in the Pink Panther films. He was on Last of the Summer Wine for over a decade, I think, in Britain. That sitcom ran for almost ever. But so yeah, I like that guy. He was a good actor. But beyond that, though, yeah, the gangsters are ridiculous. They make Goldfinger seem that much more, almost more normal at that point, because they are just, hey, how you doing? It's very, very. We're going to go start Vegas.
Glenn, would you agree with the? I guess this would be kind of the British interpretation of the American organized crime family.
Yeah, I think so.
Down to the zoot suits and fedoras.
Yeah.
Hey, why is the pool table moving? Oh my God!
They get excited about every damn thing. You ain't gonna lie. What's going on?
What's going on? Like, wow, you guys really are.
They haven't seen technology change in 20 years, so that they don't know.
Yeah. But in general, this film overall for Goldfinger, I think I can see why a lot of people really enjoy it. I think this is out of the three a little bit of the better ones, better constructed ones. I mean, as far as the story goes, the story really, even though you have odd motivation with Goldfinger, Glenn, how'd you feel with the way the story was overall, the way it played out? I mean, did you think did it keep your interest at all, or did it get a little flat for you at some points?
I don't know if it got flat at all, Pussy Galore. I think it kept my interest pretty well, Pussy Galore. And I think there was enough story, Pussy Galore, that kept you interested the whole way, Pussy Galore. No, I think I like it. I mean, it's definitely a bit of a sign of its times. Mm-hmm. Even your actiony, thriller type movies in the 60s, a lot of them are not, by modern audience standards, they'd be considered boring.
Sure.
But I think this one still has enough going on where it's still a fun movie. You get enough classic, what is now, classic Bond. I mean, there it was, new, kind of the Sean Connery guy is actually not bad kind of thing. But yeah. No, I think it's still fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Doc, how about you? Would you agree that the story is fun with it? That it doesn't really have too many lower points, even for a '60s film?
I think it keeps moving, which is one of its benefits. It changes locale a few times, so there's a certain level of travelogue involved. which I think was very. Again, we keep talking about this being a period of its time, and I think the travelogue part of it was very critical at the time. You see Miami, quote unquote. You see footage of Miami anyway.
Yeah.
There's a chunk that's somewhere in England maybe or not, wherever the golf course is. I didn't quite grasp where the golf course was.
Geneva, I think it was.
Thank you. And then obviously there's a good chunk of it set in Kentucky, more or less. So it has that benefit. The Miami was a very fancy hotel, so there's that high life. It's that Playboy man style lifestyle that was promoted very heavily in the late 50s, early 60s. So you got to see a little bit of the world. You got to see some action. You got to see some pretty girls. You got to see a few fist fights. And I think that was the main selling point for these films at the time, was that you were going to see some interesting locales. Obviously, they in the other films, they go to different locations, or at least you get location footage a little bit of these other places. So it felt very international. It made the story feel very big, made it feel like you were seeing something important. That was happening, and this man was saving the world, one bad guy at the time. So yeah, no, it's there's a lot going on. Does that mean that there are stretches like Glenn said that by a modern audience might seem a little long? Probably, maybe, but to be honest, the length of this film is about the length of a drama / thriller at this point in our time too. So nothing's really changed in that regard.
Yeah, it clocks in an hour and 50 minutes. So there's actually, which surprised me. I was like, wow, I forgot that this film was this long.
See, the only difference is now there would be like another 10 minutes of credits. So look at it like now, you're actually getting 10 more minutes of story that you wouldn't have gotten now at this point. You'd have to see like the third and fourth assistant director and the best boys and the grips and all that sort of thing that we don't really get in the 60s credits. So. It's a bonus. Look at it as a bonus.
It is a bonus. But we also in here get pretty much familiar faces that stay familiar faces, not only through James Bond, Sean Connery, but some of these faces stick all the way through with almost every Bond, namely Miss Moneypenny, played by Lois Maxwell, who I think was Bond with Moneypenny up until she passed away, wasn't she, Doc?
Same with Q. I mean, Q lasted up until what? He handed over to John Cleese, and the only reason he left is because he died in a car crash.
Yeah,
man was what, 80, 90 something, and was still well enough to make films, except for the fact that he died in a car crash. Desmond Llewellyn.
Yep, Desmond Llewellyn. And what's also interesting is Goldfinger marks the first time he's actually referred to as Q.
Really? I was not aware of that offhand.
Well, at least that's what he's actually credited the first two films. Well, I think he came on at In Russia with Love.
Okay.
What Desmond did. There was one person playing the character, but in Russia with Love, and his character and the character he plays in Dr. No was actually known as Boothroyd.
Okay.
There was General Boothroyd and Boothroyd. This is the first one where we get Q, get him referred to as Q. Though we still get all the gadgets. Glenn, what'd you feel about Bond's gadgets in this one versus, say, later Bond films and his gadgets?
Well, I mean, the big thing is the car.
Uh-huh.
True.
I mean, the Aston Martin, which is just awesome. I mean, it's got the machine gun, in the headlights and
the oil.
Yeah.
And the smoke.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
and the ejector seat.
It's pretty much what the Spy Hunter game
yes
is pretty much this car. I mean, pretty much everything from Spy Hunter is this.
Totally.
But yeah, it's
and the little spinny things that come out of the wheels, the
tire slashers, and
yes.
But this was also the first time that we got the Aston Martin, correct?
Yeah.
and then it kind of came
because
his
he wanted his Bentley again, and he goes, no, you're getting the Aston Martin this time.
which according to trivia, Martin was a little bit leery of loaning two of their cars to James Bond film.
And then their sales went up 50%.
Yeah, and then they never had to pay for another car again to make a Bond film because everybody's like, "Here, who take mine?" So, but yeah, there's a lot of Bond firsts in this one, which surprised me as well. Because I'm watching this going, "Oh, wow, this is where they all came from." I mean, they even had the bulletproof vest testing, and that whole lab scene was like. You're like, okay, here's the Q scene. You're pretty much waiting for it all. Any James Bond film now, you're just waiting for the Q scene, I think, because those are always the most fun. Like his little tracking device that fit in his shoe.
Yup.
Which I got a little Get Smart feeling for that.
Fair enough.
I thought he was going to pull it out and go,
control
it like a phone. Yeah.
86 to control. Where's 99? Where's Hermie?
We won't talk about where 99 is. But a little extra trivia for you folks about Goldfinger is this was the fastest grossing picture in film history at the time. So much, in fact, that it was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records as the fastest grossing picture in film history, which again, 1964, this is pretty impressive. This is a time when you don't have mega multiplex theaters. A lot of theaters were only one screen.
True. What do they mean? Do you know what they mean by fastest grossing though? Like to make their money back?
I think so, or
okay.
I believe that's what it's in context to.
Okay, that's what made sense to me, but I wanted.
Yeah, I didn't have it. I didn't have a chance to dig too far into it, but from my understanding, yeah, it was the fastest one to make its money back. So,
I bet you it still hasn't made a profit though.
We are talking about a different studio system at the time, so
slightly.
And also other trivia. This is Steven Spielberg's most favorite James Bond film, apparently. So for those of you who are big Steven Spielberg fans, there you go. And yeah, this is the third one, and he would go on to do 3 more after this. But I think Thunderball is the only one that made it a little bit bigger than this one. Then after that, it kind of went a little because I think they overdid it a bit. And then, of course, there's all the behind-the-scenes drama, which we won't get into too much with that. But yeah, I can see why Goldfinger is a lot of people's favorites. And what we're going to do now is ask my crew here, if we haven't hit the topic yet, see if they have something for us that they'd like us to discuss. So, Glenn, let's go with you first. Were you able to come up with a question or something that we haven't covered already?
Not really. We've covered quite a bit of it. I mean, I had things I was going to mention, but we've already mentioned them, primarily about like Odd Job and the stuff with Honor Blackman. But we've covered all of that. So,
well, I'm sorry.
I guess this is the question I would ask.
Sure.
Of the Bond films, where would you rate this?
Oh, good call, Doc. Why don't you go first?
Okay. I will admit rather freely, I have not seen all the Bond films.
Well, you just there's only like 20 some.
I know. I've seen maybe about a quarter or a third of them. I have, both. I have a friend that's very much into them, that knows them backwards and forwards. My dad was always very fond of watching them, certainly to the point where we weren't allowed in the living room when they were on ABC because they were too adult for us as children. But then once I got old enough, it was like, come here, watch this part. This is really cool. So I would say this, out of the ones that I've seen with that context in mind, this is pretty, this is top tier, certainly. mostly because it and a lot of it depends on what are you in the mood for. Bond has, at least in that regard, some variation. So if you're in the mood for something a little wackier or something a little more crazy, you've got a lot of the Roger Moore era. You've got a lot of the Pierce Brosnan era, certainly. If you want something a little more, I hesitate to use the word realistic, but comparatively so, I think this fits that bill rather well because, again, while Auric Goldfinger is not the crazy over the top villain, he's very obsessive. He's a little unique, but he's not completely weird. So the story floats out in a rather normal fashion for the time period. Certainly, if you want something action packed and almost kind of serious with a little bit of flair, understanding that it's fun, this is a very solid film in that regard. So I'd say it's pretty close to the top for the ones that I've seen, at least.
Yeah, I've actually seen, I think, almost all of. Yeah, I've seen all of them. Haven't rewatched most of them. Goldfinger is one I occasionally rewatch. It's in the top. I would say in the top 5 for me, very near the top. Not just because it was a lot of the firsts, but yeah, it was just. This is where it had found its feet, I think. And so for me, I think, yeah, I'd put it near in the top 5 for sure of Bond films out there. How about you, Glenn? Where would you put it?
Ooh, where would I put this one? Well, it's better than The Living Daylights. No, I would rank this up pretty high. For me, this is one of those kind of iconic Bond films. If for people who are Bond fans, and have been, from the early days, I think you'll find this in probably the top 1 or 2 spot for most people who are like big Bond fans. I think Sean Connery set the standard for how all Bonds are measured. And I mean, obviously you have Lazenby, who was like, he'll have to play it once. And I still rank him pretty high. And Roger Moore's fun, but his Bonds are completely different.
Yeah.
They're so much more goofy.
Yeah.
And I think of the classics, I mean, I think the Connery ones are some of the best ones, followed by the current ones with
Craig.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, Daniel Craig. I mean, Goldfinger and From Russia with Love, I think, are the 2 best John Bond films, period. And then I get the Casino Royale and Skyfall. And then it's back to Connor again with Dr. No and You Only Live Twice. The only more one I would put in my top 10 is probably The Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh yeah,
So
good call. Yeah, that's a good list. I would agree with it. That's definitely this is one of the better ones in general out there, and that's a lot to say for a series that's gone 20 plus movies. I think it is
24.
24. Wow, that's impressive run for anything.
And 50 some years, that's
Yeah.
a long time with changing styles and everything.
Definitely. And Doc, how about you? Did you have a question or a topic that we haven't already touched on that you maybe wanted to bring to the table?
I had a thought that popped into my head. I don't remember if it was before I started watching the film or knowing that I needed to bring a topic that just in general kind of came to me. I don't know how weird this is, but the question or the topic was, would you consider James Bond to be a superhero?
Oh, Glenn?
Kind of. I mean, if you can consider Batman a superhero, who's just a dude with a lot of gadgets and knows how to fight, then in a way, yeah, I would say yes, he is, because in a lot of ways, what he does is almost inhuman.
True.
I mean, the fact of all the things he does and just how he always gets out of every predicament. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree that in a way he is a superhero. He's not just a spy. He, especially when you get into those films after Thunderball and as we mentioned the Roger Moore years especially where he things get even more kind of just insane with Bond and what he can do and can't do and how he gets out of things and survives most situations people would never have been able to survive and get out of things. And yeah, his gadgets, sure, I'll call him a superhero. Sure, I think if they weren't put, I think if you take the same character and instead of putting him in a suit and drinking martinis in that, you put him in a superhero outfit. Yeah, you still can do the same character in just a different outfit. And so I would call him, yeah, a superhero as well. How about you, Doc? You consider him a superhero?
I think in some ways he's the next stage from the cliffhanger serial
Mm,
heroes, which most of which are in a lot of ways are superheroes or considered to be superheroes to some degree. I mean, certainly we had Captain Marvel, there was Captain America, there was the Lone Ranger, the Green Hornet. So I think he very well fits into at for the early '60s a modern of that time version of that character, um, or that arc or that type certainly.
hmm.
So in that way, yeah, he's very definitely a superhero, um, rooted in a reality of a world that had been in a giant war, where men had to do very significant things, very weird things in some cases, very uh, devious things to some degree in order to make sure that their sides won the conflict.
Sure.
And to some degree women too certainly, or don't want to
Hmm.
diminish what they did too, because Ian Fleming's stories are based on the reality of what he and people he worked with experienced, just taken to a different scale. So
Sure.
very definitely, yeah, this is I would say he's not a superhero in the traditional sense because, as you note, he doesn't wear a costume, but he's got the suit. He's if instead of if he put on an iron suit, he's that close to being Iron Man. To be honest,
Mm,
he's half a step away. He's got the money. He's got the group behind him. He's got all the gadgets. The only difference is he puts on the cool suit, and that's not his Tony Stark era. That's his go to work business suit.
right.
But yeah, no, I think he is to some degree, and I think that's why we have Nick Fury, Agent of Shield. I think a lot of that is because of Bond. Bond created a giant, just following, and all these other stories and series and everything that followed in his wake because of how popular this movie series was.
Yeah, I could definitely see how it set the groundwork because people saw, oh, we can put a fairly over the top villain in a movie and people will still come to see it. Or he could do some things that other people can't and people will actually buy it. And then and I think we mentioned it earlier that these are a bit fanciful. These are a little bit of a fantasy for people, especially of that time, to escape. And yeah, it set the groundwork, I think, not only for the other Bond films that came after it, but also the other spy films in general or superhero characters in general. And you think term superhero, you think automatically the cape and cowl and that type of thing, but they can come in many different forms. And yeah, I would definitely say that Bond is one of them. So I think we'll wrap it up tonight. James Bond Goldfinger is not a particularly deep film, but it is an entertaining one and one that really set the groundwork for a lot of things afterwards. So right now, like we did with the other specials, but you can probably guess this time it'll probably be a little bit different than our previous ones. We're going to ask our guests here if third time really was a charm with Goldfinger, and we'll start with Glenn. Glenn, is third time a charm with Goldfinger? Your final thought?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think this film solidified Bond as a as something that would have legs to go on for a long time. And Connery had really just nailed the role and said, this is who Bond is. And yeah, absolutely, third time is more than the charm.
Excellent. And Doc, how about you? Your final thought, and is third time a charm?
I would agree with Glenn. Totally. This is Connery locking into this. This is Connery making himself to some degree the actor that he's going to be, that where people think of him as Sean Connery. This is Bond. This is third time is very definitely the charm as far as Goldfinger goes, I would say. Very much so.
And I would say as well, third time is definitely a charm, and it's still a charming film. Watching it now, even though you have some of the cars in that, and the some of it, the way some of the subject matter and some characters are presented does make it a bit dated. But overall, for a Bond film, this is a solid Bond film that is just a little bit above the norm. So you know that this is a movie, but at the same time, it's not over the top and Moonraker crazy. So
had to go there, huh?
I had to go there. I'm sorry. I was trying to think of what's the most crazy Bond film. We'll go Moonraker.
What's the one where he's surfing down the explosion with the Pierce Brosnan one? The bad CGI? I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Whatever.
But this not only set the precedent and groundwork, but has tropes that were exploited still today in spy films and James Bond films. And though the character and the films change with the times, this film is one of those that I think stands the test of that time and should be watched by anyone who likes especially the later Bond films, the newer ones. You can, especially if you're a big fan of Skyfall, watch Goldfinger, because you'll see a lot of similarities in where a lot of the references kind of come from. So we're gonna wrap it up here tonight. I'm just want my guests real quick now to tell you where you can find them at when they're not here. Go ahead, Glenn.
You can find me on YouTube with the B Movie Bunker and Giant Bunker Productions. You can also find me on Astro Radio Z. You can find me on the Adventure Party podcast at gncast.com, or just follow me on Twitter at Guy in a Bunker.
Fantastic. And Doc, go ahead. Where can they find you at in Milwaukee?
I'll talk fast as I can. It's my honor and my privilege to be part of the Boozy Bardians and perform with the Shakespeare Raw shows. In May 8th, 9th, and 10th, we'll be doing Coriolanus. We pick a name out of a hat and we play a character at the beginning of the show. Those start at 7:30. They're at Best Place at 901 West Juneau Avenue in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Last month, or actually this month, it's still April, we did Much Ado About Nothing. I was Claudio, and I was also Benedict, so I got married twice in 1 week. That was an interesting experience, to say the least. I'll also briefly, very, very, very briefly, pimp the Variety Hour Happy Hours Stars Wars 2 El Galactic Boogaloo that's happening May 5th and 6th at Comedy Sports at 420 South 1st Street in Milwaukee. Those are at 8 p.m., and those, I'm sure, will be funny, even though I am not involved in those shows. The first one was hilarious. So go find the Boozy Bar Productions on Facebook. Go find Variety Hour Happy Hour. They'll be able to tell you more things. There'll be videos. There'll be other promotional things. And go watch some live shows if you have the opportunity, and not, movies are great. People in front of you saying silly things is that much more fun sometimes.
It definitely can be, especially the guy, Comedy Sports from when I was down there and we used to go, and just live performances. There's something special about a live performance that people should experience every so often versus your rather well edited stories. Something can and usually does go differently than planned with a live performance, which makes it so much more fun. So thank you to my guests. Hope you've enjoyed the Third Time's a Charm Goldfinger episode. We are doing something special in June. I'm not going to release it yet, but you can check out the Special Mark Facebook page to stay up to date on stuff, as well as have your say at facebook.com/groups/SMPRD. You go there, join the group. We'll let you in, and you can have a say of what shows we do and such. And we also have the Facebook page, Spoiler Room by itself, with specialmarkproductions.com, where you can find all the great episodes here, as well as on iTunes, where we ask you to subscribe, rate, and comment. It always helps us out. We appreciate you listening, folks. And now, say goodnight, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Goldfinger. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, no, I'm not her. I'm sorry. I just murdered that song.